Om aham rudre bir vasubhisharam yahamaditya ruta vishwadevai aham mitra varuno bhabibharam yahamindragni aham ashwino bha aham somamahanasam bibharmyaham tvashtaramutapushanam bhagam aham dadhami dravinam bhavishmate supravye ajamanaya sunvate aham rashtri sangamani vasunang chikitushi pratamaya agniyanam Tama deva vyadaduh purutra bhuristatra bhurya veshayantim Maya so annamattiyo vipashyati yah praniti yahim shrinot yuktam Amantavo mam tau pakshyanti shruti shrutashraddivam te vadami Ahameva swayamidam vadami jushtam devebhirutammanushevihi Yang kamaye tantamugrang krinomi tam brahmanam tam rishim tam sumedham Aham rudraya dhanuratanomi brahma dvishesharavehantavau Aham janaya samadam krinomyaham dyava prithivya vivesha Aham suve pitaramasya murdhan mama yonirapsva antas samudre tato vitishte bhuvananu vishvotamam dyam varshmanopasprashami aham eva vata iva pravam yarabhamana bhuvanani vishwaha paro diva para ena prithivyaitavati mahina sambhabhuva Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. I move with the Rudras and also with the Vasus. I move with the Adityas and all the gods. I support both Mitra and Varuna, Indra and Agni and the two Ashwins. I uphold Soma, the exuberant. I uphold Twashtar, Pushan and Bhaga. I pour wealth on the offerer of oblation, the worshipper, and the pious presser of Soma. I am the ruling queen, the amasser of treasures, full of wisdom, first of those worthy of worship. In various places the divine powers have set me. I enter many homes and take numerous forms. The man who sees, who breathes, who hears words spoken, obtains his nourishment from me alone. On recognizing me, he yet dwells in me. Listen, you who know. What I say is worthy of belief. It is I myself who announce and utter the tidings that gods and men alike rejoice to hear. The man I love, I make increase in strength. I make him a priest, a sage, or a learned seer. It is I who draw the mighty bow of the god, that an arrow may pierce the hater of the holy word. Among the people I arouse the struggle, and I have permeated earth and heaven. At the world's summit, I bring forth the Father. My origin is in the waters, in the ocean. Thence I am spread through all existing worlds, and even touch the heaven with my forehead. I breathe out strongly like the wind, while clasping unto myself all worlds, all things that are. I tower above the earth, above the heavens, so mighty am I in my power and splendor. So, my topic is a little wider than Songs of Durga. It's more like Songs of the Divine Mother, of which Durga and Kali will be the focus. And we started with one of the very oldest songs of the Divine Mother, the Devi Suktam from the Rig Veda. So no one really knows how old the Rig Veda is, but it is the oldest scripture in India. And there are a few, amongst all the many, many hymns, there are a few to the goddess, and the Devi Suktam that I just read and translated is one. So we see This is the first concept coming from ancient times of the mother. Later on, there began to grow around this concept of the mother a whole philosophy, a whole way of looking at the world. But I might give some of that talk, but I think I'm going to try and give a right brain talk. In other words, I'm going to try and rely mostly on on song and on poetry and story. And to start that, I'm going to give the same caveat that I gave in Boston this morning. The tradition of the Devi, for the most part, is a non-dual tradition. It's a tradition that says there is only one reality in the world, or at all. And that reality is absolutely without limit, without form, anything that one could think or say or imagine is already presenting boundaries to that one reality. So the practice of the Divine Mother is very similar to the kinds of practices one would learn in Vedanta, with a little bit of twist. I think I may have talked about this last time I was here. In Kashmir Shaivism and Tantra, which are the primary traditions that the Devi tradition emerges from, what is called Brahman in Vedanta, that vast, unbounded, timeless, spaceless, unlimited sense of Satchidananda, existence, knowledge, and bliss, is called Shiva. And not to be equated yet with the god Shiva that's so familiar from India, with the matted hair, the jata, and the ashes and the tiger skins. This is the same unbounded, transcendent consciousness that forms the basis of all consciousness. And the idea here is, again, this unbounded Shiva, this unbounded consciousness, was if you could say it was a characteristic, its characteristic is called prakasha. It's what lights up all our own consciousness, like a lamp. Like a lamp lights up the whole room. The Shiva, the prakasha, the Brahman, that consciousness, our very thoughts, the way that we think, the way we perceive, what we see, what we hear, all of that is lit up as if by that consciousness. Call it Shiva, call it Brahman, and the Sanskrit word for that is prakasha. It's lights. It's shining, everything shines, as the Upanishad says. This unbounded consciousness has another characteristic, and that is it is infinitely manifest. And so without being limited. In other words, it has the power to manifest infinitely without actually changing its own nature or becoming less than it is. In other words, when I say infinite manifestation, it's everything that this universe and the multiverse, and not only that, it also is every potential and every possibility that could ever exist in time and space. So it has this infinite power to manifest, which is called the Shakti, of course, because in Sanskrit, Shakti means power, and it comes from the root shak, to enable or to be able. And it's also a feminine word, and so almost immediately the idea of this creative power became the idea of the Devi, of the goddess. And so my next right-brained presentation is comes from the Marathi saint Gyanadeva, whose own philosophy had something very similar to the Kashmir Shaiva Tantra philosophy that was giving birth to these ideas. And this is verse, and remember, songs, as we're going to do today, poetry, which I'm going to read, verse of any kind, say Bhagavad Gita, which most of us are familiar with, is not really meant to be understood with the linear, rational mind. That there's another kind of knowing that resides deeper than our linear, rational mind. And the goal of sadhana, the goal of spiritual practice, is to be able to dive deep into that place for ourselves. You know the song, I was singing it earlier. Dooba-dooba-doob, rukshagare amarmon. Oh mind, dive deep into the ocean of form. So, but often we just stay on the surface of form, because especially if we've been around, say, Vedanta for a long time, we know the answers to all the questions. But what we know are sentences and and perhaps we quote them a little, especially us, those of us who give talks. We get up there and glibly quote all sorts of things with great facility because we're quite familiar with them, but never stop to think, wait a minute, that's the surface. For instance, and I use this a lot, the word eternal, do you actually know what it means? It comes from the Greek, and it used to be, probably you know, used to be spelled A-E-T-E-R-N-A-L. And it's the word that's used to translate the Sanskrit word nitya. Anyway, eternal means it never had anything to do with time. It doesn't mean it goes on endlessly in time. It means it's totally transcendent. So, we can say, well, yes, I know, the Gita says it's eternal truth, blah, blah, blah. So I would immediately say, are we just glibly repeating phrases, or do you actually have the experience of eternal? What we want is to dive deeper than the glib phrases. Oh, yes, we can all say the Bhagavad Gita says that detachment is one of the ways to reach the goal. Do we truly know what detachment means? And what I know of detachment might be different how Shravani knows or how Michelle knows or any of them. That, in other words, we have to make these things our own and be careful of just staying on the surface. So these verses and these songs and are meant to dive down under the rational mind, and rational mind will say, hey, wait, I don't get it. But that's the point. They're kind of like Zen Buddhist koans. They're confounding. They're bringing the rational mind to a dead standstill so that the indwelling divine can begin to recognize itself once more. So anyway, I could go on like this, but I'll use up all my time. By the way, I see it. So, I think I'll tell a story first. And this is a story that, if you know a little bit, it's a very popular story in Puranic lore. And it's the story of Sati. But one of the wonderful things about any of the Indian religious traditions is there's no one way to tell this story, or anything. There's no one way to do anything. And so this is the story as told by my Tantrika friends. And I don't mean here the American understanding of Tantric, which is hot tub religion, right? Or the Indian understanding, which means black magic. That the Tantric tradition is a tradition that basically worships the divine as the goddess. And so you'll see how this goes. The story centers, of course, around the god Shiva, who, as you probably know, is kind of like a threshold person. In other words, Shiva doesn't follow the norms of any society. Instead, he's always on the outskirts, and he doesn't have normal clothes. He's got dreadlocks, jata, matted hair, and ashes like the sadhus, the Nagababas, still do in India. And wears a tiger skin and snakes and whatnot, and his friends are ghoulies and little mean pixie type, the kinds of people and things that nobody else wants to deal with. And a totally unacceptable kind of a person, or God, you could say. But he's necessary for the upholding of creation. In other words, through the process of being born and living for a while and dying. If he steps out, the thing starts falling apart. So Shiva was two-stepped out. He was meditating and not paying any attention. And the other god said, hey, look, this isn't working. We have to do something to get him more involved. And so, guess what? They went to the Divine Mother. And they said to her, well, look, we can't, the world is not, the process doesn't work. There's like a glitch in the program. And so she agreed that she would take birth in order to get Shiva back on track. But she said, I will do it under one condition, and that is that when I take birth, my family and everybody else will recognize myself as the Devi, that I am worth respecting and I am worth taking care of, and I should never be dishonored. And they said, sure, we'll do that. So she was born, she agreed to be born as this, we're not quite sure what Daksha was, kind of a halfway god, that's not quite human, not quite divine, a lesser kind of god. She was born as Daksha, one of the Brahmin sages' daughter. And it all went very well, and she grew up, and indeed she, through her gorgeous beauty, and her very energetic form indeed distracted Shiva, and they fell in love and they got married. All right, but the thing is, Daksha and all his friends, they were never very happy about this. I mean, look at who my daughter married. This thing as Jata, he associates with ghoulies, and he doesn't do the right things, and he's dressed in a tiger cloth, and look at him. So Daksha, after a few eons, was going to hold a sacrifice, and of course, you know, the story goes that he deliberately did not invite Shiva. And the usual story is that Sati was, by the way, whose name means I am, existence. That the usual story goes, Sati was so enraged because her husband had been dishonored that she threw herself into the fire. But the tantric telling of the story says, Sati went to her father and said, hey, I told you, you disrespect me, you disrespect my husband, you promised to honor me, and I told you I would only stay as long as you did that. But you are holding me in dishonor, and I am leaving, and I am not coming back until I am honored. And she didn't throw herself in the fire in the tantric story. She just disappeared in like a cosmic explosion of flame, and that was the end of it. I had enough, I'm out of here, goodbye. And the interesting thing is that almost all over the world, Sati was missing for a very long time. But almost all over the world now, the tradition of the goddess is back on the rise. And the time has come that she might, again, in this story, take birth because people are willing to give her the honor that she expects. So you can see it's a very different story. This is a very energetic and strong goddess figure. And also we have to remember that Sita seems to be a tragic figure, but you have to remember she also was the Divine Mother, and she was born, her father plowed her up out of the earth. And of course, we know the story of Sita, and she was abducted and she came back, and the people didn't think that she was quite pure enough because she had been abducted, and she was exiled, and then she came back, and they didn't think again, and she said, okay, I've had it. And she threw herself back into the earth and disappeared. So stories like these, of course, have an allegorical meaning. But in a story, in a myth, like the songs that we're going to perform, they are meant to be understood on a different level. Myths are something that never, this is Joseph Campbell's definition. Myths are something that never were but always are. So they go beneath the rational mind. And one of the ways to dive deep into these stories is not to hear about what somebody else says they mean, but to remember that in these stories, we are every single character in them. In other words, just me. I am Daksha. What is about, I am Sati, I am Shiva. I am the ghoulies and the demons, and out there on the, that's how, when we think about these stories, we have to remember, we're all of those things. And when we start examining them that way, then the insight, the story unlocks its experience. The goal of spiritual life is experience, not to know the answers. And the truth of the matter is, we're talking about whether we want to call it Shiva, whether we want to call it the Mother, and an existence so on one hand transcendent, and on the other hand is the very basis of our being. That the way that we find the answers is to live our way into the experience. The German poet Rilke wrote a letter to one of his students that said, you have to live the questions with the idea of some way living your way into the answers. So all these questions, why, how, these questions are the questions of the rational mind that by their very nature polarize everything, hot, cold, me, you, inside, outside, Shiva, Shakti, you name it, it's polarized. The difference between the mother tradition and Vedanta is this. Most Vedanta, I should say. In Vedanta, everything that we experience is said to be a vivarta, an appearance. There really is only one, and all of this is just an appearance, kind of like a mirage or a magic show. In the Shakta Shaiva tradition, this is a parinama. It's an actual deliberate transformation of the divine into all of this. And so that has wonderful implications for us. We are not mistakes of Maya, you know? Sometimes we feel like that, too much Vedanta, and we're thinking, oh, my very existence is a mistake, kind of, you know, the ignorance personified. But in the Shakta tradition, everything, including ourselves, is a deliberate creation. In other words, we're not mistakenly Gitaprana. We're on purpose, deliberately Gitaprana. We are that consciousness that had to hide itself from itself in order to believe that I'm this separate person, Gitaprana. And that's the Maya. In Vedanta, the world is an illusion in a certain way. It's an appearance. It has no real reality. In the Shaiva Shakta tradition, the world's real. This really is here. We really are different. But where the Maya comes in is we're not separate. that, so essentially the two are saying the same thing, that there is a oneness, but this oneness is deliberate, and that means that I have my own path, and everyone has their own path, and we are nothing, each one of us, other than the mother expressing herself as us. Not to mention everybody outside, too. And so the Shakti tradition is to divinize everything. And to borrow a Zen saying that I just heard, it goes like this. Those who discriminate between the sacred and the mundane only know the mundane. But those who experience the sacred know there is no mundane. And that, in essence, is the Shakti view. There is no sacred and mundane. It's all sacred. It's all her. I am her. Everybody is her. Kind of evolving and re-evolving back towards her own knowledge. So that's a long-winded beginning to this poem, more or less, written by Gyanadeva. I'll only read part of it. And remember, this is verse. It's not meant to be totally understood by the rational mind. And on top of this, the translation is a little tricky. The union of Shiva and Shakti. Thus have I paid my homage to the god and goddess who are the limitless primal parents of the universe. On the charming spot, the lover himself, out of overflowing love, becomes the beloved, who is made up of the same flesh and who eats the same food. Out of deep longing, they swallow each other, and again emit each other because they like to be two. They are neither completely identical nor completely different. We do not know their real nature. How strong is their desire to enjoy themselves? They become one through it and never allow their unity to be disturbed, even in jest. They are so afraid of their separation that although they have given birth to the child in the form of the universe, their duality is not disturbed. Even though they perceive the animate and the inanimate nature emanating from them, they do not allow any third object to touch them. They are seated on the same ground, existence, and they wear the same ornament of light, consciousness. From time immemorial, they dwell happily in union. The difference itself that tried to discover duality to enjoy it was abashed to see their intimacy and merged itself in their sweet union. It is through God that the other is goddess, and without her, the Lord is nowhere. As a matter of fact, their existence is due to each other. Oh, how sweet is their union. The great world is too small for them to live in, while they live happily, even in the smallest particle. They treat each other as their very life, and they do not create even a blade of grass without the help of each other. These are the only two inmates in the home of the universe. When the Lord goes to sleep, the mistress remains awake and plays herself the part of both. And that is our condition. The Lord is asleep as we feel ourselves separate. In other words, the transcendent one is asleep, and the mistress is playing the part of both as us. And the last, it's not the last verse, but the last I'll read is, if either of them happens to wake up, the whole house is swallowed up, and nothing is left behind. It goes on like this. So you can see this is the tradition out of which these Devis that we're more familiar with, the goddesses, spring. So I'm going to go forward in time. I have till what time? Okay. And when we're talking about songs of Durga, we're of course talking first about the Devi Mahatmyam, what also known as the Chandi and the Durga Sapta Shakti, the 700 gerrymandered verses to Durga. And why I say gerrymandered is they tried very hard to get that 700, and there's no set way, but in some places, Markandeya Uvacha counts as a verse. That means Markandeya said. So it's been gerrymandered. It's the Devi Mahatmyam or the Chandi. And this is the story. Do all of you know pretty much the story of the Chandi? Lots of people hate it, and I'll tell you why. It's the story of some bloody battles between the goddess and the demons. And with very explicit, and she ripped their heads off, and their lion crushed them and ripped them apart with the claws, and, Kali threw them in her mouth and crunched their heads open kind of verses. And this is not what we would call very sattvic reading material. But the thing about it, again, is we have to ask ourselves, this is a story, which means we are the Devi and we are the demons. And it can be taken as, on the surface, okay? This is the story of good against evil. But in the Indian tradition, these Devis, these goddesses, are transcendent of all polarities. They're neither good nor evil. So we cannot make it a story of good against evil. That they transcend that polarity. And we have to ask ourselves, what are these demons? And these demons, of course, are all the little programs set almost into our very DNA that cause us to fall victim to Mahamaya's little trick. In other words, our ego-bound, disturbing emotions and habits that possibly have been carried on from lifetime after lifetime. They form a veil, what is called a varana in Sanskrit, that Shiva or Shakti casts down upon the knowledge of oneness to hide it from itself. And thus, all creatures think of themselves as small and finite and solid, as if wrapped in plastic. So the demons are none other than these disturbing emotions and tendencies, our thoughts. Oh, I can't do this. I'll never be able to do this. Oh, I'm so awful. I hate that person. Jealousy, anger, extreme desire. You know what they are. They're any kind of pattern that we have that causes us to feel disturbed. Do you know what I mean? That, because, say, for instance, extreme pleasure is a disturbing emotion. We don't feel lust. We don't feel calm, right? We're like, so that's not a calm state. And anger obviously isn't either. So all these thought patterns and disturbing emotions, they're none other than the demons that the mother in the Devi Mahatmyam is slaying. And what is that mother? That's the self within that is as if coming to help us. Why? Because we're making the step to turn around and see, oh yes, these things are not helping me in my life, my spiritual life. This is what holds me, binds me down to the illusion, nothing else. My experience of the divinity is not going to come from somewhere else. That I am that already. I just have to get rid of these demons that tell me I'm this divided person and the universe is so huge and I'm so little. And no one's going to convince me otherwise. So the Chandi needs to be read on that level. That, and the clue to that is that often the songs, there's 4 hymns in the Chandi, and I think I'm going to maybe do part of one, where the gods ask, the gods who are, we could say the gods often, I hate to tell you because I've just told you don't listen to other people's explanations, but the gods often are the symbols of our drive towards perfection. That when we get too involved, say spiritual aspirants do this, I want to become the perfect human because I want to realize the divine. But what do we get? We become the perfect human. But our goal is to transcend that. So being a perfectionist in spiritual life, and I mean an obsessive perfectionist, is just as much as a disturbing emotion as anger or lust or any of the other ones. That there is no such thing as a perfect me. And that's not what we want to do, perfect this me. We want to transcend this me. We want to make this me as big as the universe. So the gods often symbolize that, the perfect world, the perfect this, the perfect that, the happy this. And the demons have power too, and they steal the power from the gods. And it takes, in the Chandi, the mother, who has all the powers of the gods. But the point I'm trying to make here is that the songs about the mother often describe her as, after she slays the demons, and particularly in Bengal, at Durga Puja, you'll see this, that the Durga statues, images, murtis all around often are in the position where she's slaying Mahishasura, Mahisha the demon. Where her, he's in the form of a buffalo, he's just halfway out of the buffalo, and she's, and the lion is, and it can be pretty gory, actually. So, but the idea here is, what is she doing? She's giving liberation to that Mahisha. And Mahisha often is known as the embodiment of anger. That Mahisha behaves in an angry, prideful way to the extreme. And so the way to understand that story is, where are we, Mahisha? And to understand that the liberation is already there. That many of the stories say, what liberation? The liberation is not from the body, not from the mind. The liberation is from the bondage of these disturbing ego-bound emotions that cause me to think me and nobody else. If I can manage to transcend that and make my mind as wide as the universe, which is normal, its base state, this prakasha of Shiva, then liberation is there. It's not that I will go somewhere else, to some other world, that this very world will be transformed as I shed the little trick that causes me to think that I am just me. I'm not Shravani. I'm not Joan. That's the Mahamaya. Shravani and Joan, they exist. They're not just an illusion of existence. They really truly exist, and they are nothing other, and all of us are nothing other than the mother. So if I shed my bondage, if I am Mahishasura slain by the mother, then I will see that there's no separation between myself and Shravani and Joan or anything else. That's the kind of experience Sri Ramakrishna had. And he had to struggle to bring his mind back to a certain time and place. That's the kind of experience many of the enlightened ones have had. Everyone's mind is their mind. It's not a winking out into some kind of other existence or non-existence. It's just simply, in 1 second, bam, it's gone. And the mother withdraws her veil, and the grace is bestowed that was bestowed from the moment we were born. Always. Anyway, I've talked too long. And now, I'm going to skip the Chandi, actually, and go to the spiritual practices that go with all this talking that I've been doing. One of the good ones, of course, the good ones, many of the decent and wonderful ones, are things that will go deeper than our rational mind. We hear these things, we learn them, and then we have to dive deep. And that's what poetry is for. That's what music is for. That is what good art is for, visual art. Dancing, All those things can take the mind deeper than just the surface words. So this kind of frightening Durga, the Devi embodied as the slayer of ignorance, of non-knowing, of our true nature, grew up in India as kind of a very powerful goddess. And in Bengal, began later on to be married to the beautiful, sweet bhakti tradition that came with Sri Chaitanya. That the Hare Krishnas are one of the heirs to that tradition. That where God is the sweet Krishna, which with his Radha and the relationship, and it's very sweet, it's very approachable, and the unapproachable goddess began to morph into the approachable goddess that we know now. So these fierce goddesses of the Chandi who smash people between their teeth, and Kali who looks like, if you read that, they're both more or less taken form in the Chandi for the first time. With Durga, with her spears and her lion and her... And Kali, even worse, with her emaciated body and her tongue covered with blood and throwing things into her mouth. How could they become everybody's mother? But they have. And the way that they have is by understanding a little bit about these forms. Kali, whose name means both dark and time. We can understand time throws everything into its mouth. There's one thing that we can be sure of in this world, and that is that we, this body, will die. We can be totally sure of that. So Kali embodies that. She will come and get us someday. We can see just by looking at this world, it's not all wonderful. Is it? That there's some beautiful things in this world, just gorgeous, and people, wonderful people, and things going on at the same time. We can think of a lot of, there's starvation and abuse and Hitlers and Pol Pots and Stalins and God alone knows what other genocidal dictators that have there's innocent suffering, seemingly. There's children who are, well, we don't want to get, that also, can we accept that as being part of the goddess? So yes, Kali or Durga, they both have left sides, and usually it's Kali, left sides and right sides. In other words, one side of them is beneficent and kind. Say Kali, let's use her iconography. No, let's not, I'm running out of time. I will read the poetry and Shravani and Abhijit will sing. All right, let us see. What I'll do when Shravani and Abhijit sing is I will read the English first, and then they will sing the song. And I think we'll do Amar Ma pretty soon. Where is it? It's on page 22. No, we'll see. If I have time, otherwise it's you. All right, so the singers talk about everything. They talk about these goddesses, and all of what I've been jabbering about, they put into wonderful, beautiful verse and song. And so the first one that Shravani is going to sing, the song goes like this. It's written by Kamala Kanta. If you know anything about bhajans, you may have heard the names of Kamala Kanta and Ram Prasad, who both lived around, I think, the 1700s, were just unbelievable musicians. And songs are still sung, particularly in Bengal. Is my black mother Shama, meaning Kali, really black? People say Kali is black, but my heart doesn't agree. If she's black, how can she light up the world? Sometimes my mother is white, sometimes yellow, blue, and red. I cannot fathom her. My whole life has passed trying. She is matter, then spirit, then complete void. It's easy to see how Kamalakanta, thinking these things, went crazy. I'm done.
শ্যামা মা কি আমার কালো রে, শ্যামা মা কি আমার কালো, লোকে বলে কালি কালো, আমার মন তো বলে না কালো, কালো রূপে দিগম্বরী, কালো রূপে দিগম্বরী, হৃদি পদ্ম করে মোর আলো রে, শ্যামা মা কি আমার কালো রে, শ্যামা মা কি আমার কালো। শ্যামা কখনো শ্বেত, কখনো পীত, কখনো নীল লোহিত রে, শ্যামা কখনো শ্বেত, কখনো পীত, কখনো নীল লোহিত রে, মায়ের সে ভাব কেমনে বুঝিতে না পারি, সে ভাব কেমনে বুঝিতে না পারি, ভাবিতে জনম গেল রে, শ্যামা মা কি আমার কালো রে, শ্যামা মা কি আমার কালো। শ্যামা কখনো পুরুষ, কখনো প্রকৃতি, কখনো শূন্যাকার হে, শ্যামা কখনো পুরুষ, কখনো প্রকৃতি, কখনো শূন্যাকার হে, মায়ের সে ভাব ভাবিয়ে কমলাকান্ত, সে ভাব ভাবিয়ে কমলাকান্ত, সহজে পাগল হলো রে, শ্যামা মা কি আমার কালো রে, শ্যামা মা কি আমার কালো রে, শ্যামা মা কি আমার কালো।
Beautifully. Who can understand Kali? You can't get her vision through the 6 philosophies. She plays with Shiva, 2 swans, amorous amidst lush lotuses. Ascetics ponder her from Muladhara to Sahasrara, in other words, in the chakras. Like Om, the root of all, Kali is the self of one who delights in the self. Just for fun, she dwells in body after body, encasing our universe in her belly. Can you imagine measuring that? The destructive Lord has grasped her core, but who else can? Prasad says, people laugh at me trying to swim across the sea. My heart knows, but my mind does not. And so, though a dwarf, I try to catch the moon. And Abhijit is now going to sing this song. It's Ram Prasad Sen, when Prasad means Ram Prasad.
কে জানে কালী কেমন, কে জানে কালী কেমন, সদর্শনে না পায় দর্শন, কে জানে কালী কেমন, মূলাধারে সহস্রারে সদা যোগী করে মনন, মূলাধারে সহস্রারে সদা যোগী করে মনন, কে জানে কালী কেমন, সে যে ঘটে ঘটে বিরাজ করেন, ইচ্ছাময়ীর ইচ্ছা যেমন, শিব জেনেছেন কালীর মর্ম, অন্য কে বা জানে তেমন, কে জানে কালী কেমন, সদর্শনে না পায় দর্শন, কে জানে কালী কেমন, প্রসাদ ভাসে লোকে হাসে, সন্তরণে সিন্ধু তরণ, আমার মন বুঝেছে প্রাণ বোঝে না, মন বুঝেছে প্রাণ বোঝে না, ধরবে শশী হয়ে বামন, কে জানে কালী কেমন, সদর্শনে না পায় দর্শন, কে জানে কালী কেমন।
Thank you. Who can explain your play, Mother? What do you take? What give back? You give and take again. For you, dawn and dusk are the same. Nothing can stop your perfect freedom. You give exactly what's deserved. Even Shiva under your feet forgets your great design. I see what you show me, a stone floating on water. Ram Prasad is your son. He can see right through those old ploys. There's a kind of stuti, a kind of song that's called a ninda stuti. Ninda means to scold. And this is also a sadhana. You don't always have to be nice to the mother. So Sri Ramakrishna said, we should cry to God, sing to God, tell everything to God. It's closer than your very own breath, nearest to the nearest. So here's an example of one of those. A java, in Bengali java, is a red hibiscus, which is sacred to the mother. Talk to me, javas, talk to me. What austerities did you do to get Mother Shama's feet? Torn from your stems on illusions plants, falling scattered to the ground at her feet, you got liberation, bursting open beside yourself with joy. If only I could learn from your example, my life might bear fruit. Thousands of sweet-smelling flowers bloom in the woods, and they're all such beauties. So how come you got Ma's feet? You're just ignorant javas. Crimson like you at the mother's feet, when will they be flowers offered to her, blessed by her? When will they turn red at the touch of her feet? When will they, just like you, blush scarlet, these dull petals of my mind? And there's not a quote, there's not an identification. That's by Nazrul Islam, that this was written by a Muslim. That in old days there was not really, everyone wrote songs to the mother in that era in Bengal. And finally, out of the gospel, it's too bad none of us know how to sing this. Oh, right. That's not the one I want. Oh, my mind, worship Kali any way you want. Just repeat the mantra your teacher gave you day and night. Think that you're prostrating as you lie on the bed. And meditate on the mother while you sleep. Go around town and imagine you're circumambulating Shamama. Each sound that enters your ears is one of Kali's mantras. Each letter of the 50 around her neck bears her name. Ram Prasad says, astonished, the goddess full of Brahman is in every creature. When you eat, think that you're making an offering to Shamama. So people are wondering if I'm going to sing, but I've gone over my time, so I don't have to do it. This is the essence right here of the tantric, the Shakti sadhana, just as Ram Prasad said. Whatever we do, no matter how we call it worldly so-called or mundane so-called, whatever we do, change a tire on our car, whatever it is, let us somehow bring the divine into that, make that an offering to the divine. Our every breath is being breathed actually for us by her. And we can even remember that on the basis of our breath, that there's a practice that the Tantrikas follow. When you breathe in, think that you are being breathed by the mother. And when you breathe out, think that you return it to her. Now, this is a little dualistic, but the idea is we don't need to make a division between our so-called sacred time. Say we come, we listen to a lecture, we meditate, we go to a puja, whatever it is, we go to a temple, that so-called sacred time. And then we say, oh, I don't have enough time for my spiritual practices. Let whatever it is that we do be our spiritual practice. Let it be a challenge that we can take to see the divine, not only in everything, but also in ourselves. We usually leave ourselves out of the quotation, out of the, not the quotation, the picture completely. Oh yeah, I can see everybody else, but not me. I'm so filled with flaws but it has to start here. That this small me is the mother, and everything is the mother, and everything in my life, no matter how trivial or how unpleasant, is also her. So I have many friends who use this as a practice. So I have a friend who was riding his motorcycle down the highway and a yellow jacket flew inside his jacket. Now, most of us would freak. He's going 65 miles an hour and he said, oh, Ma, look what you did now. Now I have the choice. What am I going to do? It's pretty obvious. You're going to sting me up. So it's a wonderful sadhana. If something awful happens, okay, Ma, this is your game. I know. But on the other hand, without then falling into the habit of expecting bad things to happen. That whatever good, so-called good, whatever so-called unpleasant, it's all the mother. So yes, mother, you've given this to me today, and tomorrow you'll take it away, or maybe you won't. So, and what does that do? that automatically, first of all, gives us a relationship with the divine. And second of all, we become more and more detached without even trying. Detachment does not mean we do not feel. Detachment means we do not cling to what we feel. So, or expect something like happiness, which is what we currently are doing. We want happiness and we want to avoid pain. The idea here is, Mother, come as happiness. Mother, come thou as pain. That, in the Christian tradition, which I'll end with a quote, I think, there was a desert father who said, "Oh Lord, you can take me to hell. I don't mind. Because if you are there, that hell is no hell for me. That's a heaven." And so that is the goal of the tantric practitioner. This world is neither a heaven nor a hell. It's all her, and that in itself is a kind of a heaven. That to understand that, to transcend that. And one day then, if we keep telling ourselves that and practicing that, one day suddenly, boom, she will open the door and we'll be standing there, as Ramprasad says, astonished. Oh, it really was her play. It really was your play. And see that we are, yes, we are we, but we are not separate. There's no separation here. There's only one. We will experience that. And then we will understand finally, what all the scriptures and the songs and the words have been trying to tell us all along. But until we have even a glimmer of that experience, we tend to hold on to the rational. So I say, dive deep. That use the rational as the base, and then dive deep. The stories, the songs, the words, the poems, the art, the dances, whatever it is, the so-called good, the so-called bad, that is the path of Durga. That is the path of Kali. That is the path of the followers of the Divine Mother. So I talked a little too much. I wanted to do a little more singing, but I went over a little bit. We probably should have practiced beforehand. So I'm glad that you were here. Thank you to our singers. You get a little taste of how they can be very beautiful, these songs. It's called Shama Sangit, songs to Shama, to the Dark Mother. There's also in Bengal, around Durga Puja, another kind of Sangit, Uma Sangit, that you may know as Agamani songs. Songs that are about the coming of Uma, that is connected with the Durga Puja. And in Bengal, they have the same status as Christmas carols have in this country. That everybody knows them and, everyone sings them. And interestingly, it's Bengal that's given birth to most of these gorgeous songs about Mother. I looked for the traditions when I was starting to do this lecture. And I couldn't find them, and I was asking around, well, in South India, are these devotional songs like this? Shankaracharya, or there are some songs attributed to Shankaracharya, which I was going to sing one of them. But they're more, and I know this from personal experience, in South India, and this is generalizing, the Devi is a little more like power. The great mother that you don't approach as your dear, sweet mommy. But in Bengal, these unapproachable mothers, go to Calcutta, you'll see Kali with her swords and her severed heads on every street corner. That as if the beautiful mother, whereas in other parts of India, they're like, oh my God. That power. So there aren't these sweet songs to the mother. There's songs that sing to not understanding her essential nature. Mother, I don't know this, I don't know that, but I do know that you're my mother, kind of songs. So maybe sometime we can do part 2. Ask Swami Yogamanandaji. Thank you.